everybody, and welcome back to the Retail Corner. And I am joined today by Mr. Rooney. He is the VP of Retail Solutions over at Rimini Street. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Cole, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, for those of us that aren't fully familiar with Rimini and yourself, can you kind of walk us through your CV a little bit and walk us through kind of what Rimini is?
Of course. So starting with my CV. I started in retail at a local supermarket when I was 16 years old, fetching carts from the parking lot. So a long tenured retail history.
I love retail stories like this. Like this.
So I ended up getting my degree in technology, and I combined my retail experience with technology and had a great time. I spent many years as CIO at Toys R Us and had global responsibility there.
Favorite place?
And Toys is interesting because we had as many stores outside the U.S. as we did inside the U.S. So it was an interesting model. And then after Toys, I went to Hudson Bay Company, which owns Saks Fifth Avenue, Gilt, Galleria in Germany, and then Hudson Bay in Canada. And then following that, I spent some time as CIO of a roofing manufacturer, and then worked my way into Rimini Street. So I was familiar with Rimini Street because I had used them at each of my stops and was familiar with and believed in the product offering.
Okay. That's cool. That's cool. So like we were talking a little bit, and you have a fascinating approach to maybe it's because of your history in retail and everything else. You have kind of a fascinating approach to IT, kind of as a cost center versus a source of retail or a source of revenue. Is there how did that evolve? Because I mean, a lot of people just see IT as, oh well, that's the money you got to put in the machine to make it work.
Yeah.
So how does that evolve? How does that work for you?
It's a great question, Cole, and it certainly is a challenge in many retail organizations. What's unique about retail for sure is the margins are tight and budgets are always a challenge.
Sure.
Most retailers view their IT costs as just that, costs. And in my early days, companies would begrudgingly give IT the budget and they needed to keep things running, and they didn't really understand it. And, just they knew bad things were going to happen if dollars were pulled. So
absolutely,
it wasn't really a collaborative environment. But now is a very different time. It's all about transparency and, in my opinion, IT optimization.
Okay.
We would take our budget, for example, and break it into buckets of what's it cost to run, what's grow, what's optimize, and then certainly what's protect. And as part of that budget process, the IT leadership team would scrub every entry with a keen focus on that run segment. And our drive was toward our total budget should be no more than 60% contributing to the run portion. So keeping the lights on shouldn't cost, what many organizations see is 90% of their budget.
Yeah.
If you're spending 90% of your budget on just keeping the lights on, then you are a cost center, and you might as well just kind of own that. But I don't think that's what retail IT leaders are doing today. I think they recognize the need to optimize their own internal processes like they do for peers across the organization. And things like RPA and AI are tools that help folks optimize their own processes, reducing that run portion and allowing for more dollars to be spent on return driving investments.
Makes sense. So one big we're talking with a client right now that they seem to be in love with the idea of on-prem stuff. And because it's, I don't know if it's a control thing. I don't know if it's like you like to see it, and their big server room is fancy and everything. But and so when you're looking at on-prem stuff versus the cloud, what are you considering? What would you tell my client to consider?
Yeah, I'll give you a real life example. So at my last gig, we vacated 2 data centers and moved to a dual cloud strategy. One was for apps and the other was our data lake for analytics. We saved millions of dollars, but it was a difficult lift and it certainly has risks. With an on-prem, capacity is fixed. Your costs are locked in, but to some extent, so is your flexibility. So it's easy to manage, but not great when you need additional flexibility. In the cloud,
like Q4, like the literal place we are right now.
Seasonal businesses are kind of prime for this, right? Because you have that bursting capability that allows you to not pay for, that massive capacity that you need for a very limited period of time.
Yeah.
But it really needs to be managed. So a lot of folks who have gone to the cloud, I'll say somewhat prematurely, have regretted it because it requires different processes and certainly some tools to help you manage it. Monitoring utilizations are critical, and it helps a successful cloud migration. Without them, costs can balloon. And I've seen several companies revert because of runaway costs. When you have unlimited, people can take advantage of unlimited. But
when there's no fences, the horses just go wild. Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah. And so,
it's a easy example, but I use are you paying for an open bar or are you paying per drink? And you got to know and manage both those scenarios in order to be effective. But I think the cloud has tremendous offerings, particularly for retail, because as we said, that bursting capability for seasonality.
Sure. And so, talking a little bit more in the technology scape and everything else like that, you and I were talking a little bit about omni-channel and how well, something happened a few years ago where we all had to stay inside, and we had to really accept Walmart delivery as a thing now and everything, and so omni-channel became more of a need instead of a want kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, what's your opinion on the whole omni-channel shift?
I think a couple things. One is certainly, the pandemic forced a lot of growth in that area. And I think it has reduced somewhat, but never back to where it was pre-pandemic.
Sure.
So
sure.
That's a good thing because consumers are exercising their choice on how they want to purchase. But I'm also passionate about, let's stop talking about channels. It's really just retail. Consumers don't look at it as channels. They don't say, I'm going to shop the online channel today, or I'm going to. They're shopping a brand, and they're going to choose which way they would like to do that. And many companies still maintain channel P&Ls and incentives. And although knowing costs and profitability at a granular level is critically important, it still can lead to cultural and company barriers. I worked once with an executive who ran stores for this retailer who literally said to me, they wish this whole website thing would just go away. It makes my life so complicated. Well, it's not going away.
They're probably not in the world anymore, but they're probably not in retail anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah. But some companies have moved toward a more geographical based P&L and incentives, meaning a catchment is how they measure in-store and online performance, helping employees see benefits of allowing the customer to choose. And I know of, a now 10-year-old startup that started with a web business and then began gradually opening stores. And they found that those stores drove increase in online sales from that catchment. So the two played off each other very well. And I think that's the power of both.
And so you're not only looking at the cultural change within the society as a whole, moving toward the different channels of sales or whatever it is, but the cultural change that has to happen behind the curtain kind of thing. And,
for sure. Go ahead.
No, I think behind the curtain has to be faster than the society sometimes, but I'm not sure which one's the cart, which one's the horse at this point.
It's an interesting paradigm because I think that for some retailers, the customers are dragging them forward, and in other cases, those retailers are paving the way for those customers to have choices. And there are new tools that are helping in some cases. I worked in a company that had commission-based in-store sales teams, and certainly they didn't want to give up sales to online. But we ended up providing them with a tool that extended a portion of our website to them so they could communicate products and looks to their customers. And if a customer made a purchase from one of those pages, the in-store associate received commission. So it's, again, breaking down some of those barriers. But
That's
your point
fantastic.
is extremely well taken. Is it the customer dragging the retailer, or is the retailer helping the customer through that process?
Absolutely, absolutely. So going back to the different buckets of IT, budget, and everything else like that. Rimini is you guys are mostly focused on support and in that kind of universe, right? And so with like a multi-billion-dollar retailer, like how can they see if what they're getting is right?
Yeah.
The support that they're getting, how do they know that? Because I mean, obviously, Rimini exists in it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists to fill a need.
Yeah.
And so, how would a multi-billion-dollar company know if they even are getting what they're paying for?
Yeah, and I think, it's an interesting dynamic. They typically buy software and it comes with support and maintenance. They never really
Sure.
assess the software maintenance piece of it. They're buying feature functionality and fit for the particular piece of software. And the support is critical, and there are lots of ways of measuring it. Certainly, SLAs, and by SLAs I mean, not did I get someone to tell me they've got my problem. Did they help me solve my problem in an expedited fashion? So
Sometimes that is the most frustrating call. You get it 45 minutes after you do something, and they say, "Oh yeah, yeah, we're taking a look at it. We have no idea what it is, but well, I mean, appreciate it, I guess." But
you can
it's like,
check that box that I met.
yeah, and then you don't hear from them for a good amount of time.
Yeah, so there's certainly, to me, response time to resolution, and then, the third being, how satisfied are you that we fixed the problem, and not, in some cases, some of these things end up being solves to the symptoms, and that's not how we're motivated. We're motivated to fix the root cause, so we
Sure.
don't get future incidents. But you know the retailer or the company's satisfaction rating is paramount to how we feel like we're doing with satisfying their needs.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So what kind of like other than SLA, what kind of data should my clients be looking at?
Again, customer satisfaction, and the responsiveness. So SLAs, everybody publishes SLA, but again, it's about responsiveness, not about resolution. So dig deep and understand how quickly are we resolving problems, and then how satisfied are we with that resolution. Those are, in my opinion, the key metrics. And again, in Rimini's case, our scope is a little different. In my experience, when I've had to sell this internally within an organization, everyone's like, I don't really understand, but the savings are great and all those other good things. But what proved out was, tickets that had been open for months and months and months quickly evaporated, and then our approach around the responsiveness and the satisfaction that we were solving root causes that weren't going to come up again was great. One of the other things about Rimini is it's a more comprehensive solution. So it includes customization, which many vendor-driven support models do not. So even if you've paid them to customize, they may not cover that in the support model. So our model is more
Right.
comprehensive, and we have better service level to resolution and better satisfaction, we think.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, one other thing I could possibly suggest would be, uh, since I mean we're at Proxima 360, we're an IT implementation project management group and developers and things like that. And so usually we see the boots on the ground. We see the actual problems, the actual things needing a solution. And I've seen it time and time again where it's the person that's dealing with the service or dealing with the support isn't the person making the decision about what support to use. And so making sure that you involve your front line, involve those boots, and in those decisions, and say, okay, well, what problems are you seeing with the service? And I guarantee you, if you go to your developers, if you go to people, they have a different set of opinions than the C-suite does about support. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I do think it's collaboration between the support team and the retailers team, and the team has to be kind of multi-level. It can't be just C-suite and saying everything's
Sure.
great. It's got to be those folks who are dealing with every incident that comes up. So I think you're spot on.
So I'm going to give you a chance to toot your own horn here. What makes Rimini different? What is different than just the out of the box support?
Yeah, and to me, the support model, the service is significantly improved. That's number one. Number two is it's a much more comprehensive model because we do include customization. So a company doesn't have to triage that incident to determine, is it in core code, is it in customized code, and then how do I get it fixed? And then certainly we're a much more economical solution. So those are the three biggest advantages I think Rimini Street brings to the table.
Okay. Now, just to be fair, we are a podcast in 2024, so we are legally obligated to talk about AI. And so, yeah, it wouldn't be a podcast without us talking about AI, at least for a couple minutes. And so, as we're looking forward and everything else like that, a lot of companies, I mean, Salesforce and everything is moving toward an AI piece to their support, where the AI can answer the top 25 questions that they've got. How are you seeing that? Are you seeing that help? Are you seeing that as the future? Are you seeing that hurt customer relations? What
You
do you
know,
think
I,
about
I've been at this a long time, as I described earlier, and I have all the gray hair to prove it. But
that? I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of new advanced technologies sit on some hype cycle for a very long time, and they kind of just meander along and either eventually get adopted or kind of fall away. I'm amazed at how quickly AI is being adopted, and certainly some of it
Sure.
is real, and some of it is somewhat exaggerated. But I've read studies and I've talked to folks that are piloting these things, and the returns are 3x plus. And I think they're driving things that are going to be beneficial for the customer, whether that's customer service and a real intelligent chatbot, or personalization, which is, I think, the future of retail. Is you don't get to that same homepage that everybody else does. You get to one that's meaningful for you and your buying habits. So I find that retailers are either piloting and learning and being very successful and seeing good returns, and then I see some that need to do some foundational work in order to prepare better for what AI can do for them.
Yeah.
But I do think it's one of the few advanced technologies that I've seen in my career that has moved at the pace it is.
It's everybody's playing catch up at this point. Because the second you're caught up, there's something new. And so, yeah, okay. So we kind of looked forward a little bit. I want you to look back. We're running against our time limit here, and so I'm curious if you could travel back in time and talk to that person, talk to that young man, just as your career is starting. You're carrying out your own groceries at this point. What advice would you give yourself when it comes to your career?
It's a very interesting question, and what pops into my mind is maybe I'll skip the punch card era. I dropped them way too many times, and it was a pain in the butt. And they didn't last that much longer after I adopted them, so I probably should have waited a little bit. But what I do tell people going into or coming out of college today is, to focus on things like data analytics, cyber. All of those fields have such an amazing runway, and I think we're only scratching the surface of some of those things.
Sure. Nothing wrong with looking to the future. Yeah, by talking to your past.
Yeah.
But Mr. Rooney, I cannot thank you enough for being part of the retail corner today, sir.
Well, Cole, thank you. It was a pleasure having a chat with you.
All right, we'll catch up with you after Q4 and kind of get you an update on how support over the season went, if that's all right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. See you next time.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.